For housing the mentally ill, crazy people. The Central State Hospital.
It was the summer of 2002, and we were shooting scenes for Little Treasure Hunters, that would go on to be on Showtime. And anybody that knows about making movies, it just takes a long time to, get things right. You got to keep doing it over and over again. And as the night wore on, you could tell everybody was getting a little edgier. I mean, after all, this was, formerly Central State Mental Institution, one of the most haunted sites in our state, and it was a little creepy. It was a full moon, and I don't know. It was just kind of was in the air. Well, I had a guy shooting behind-the-scenes footage, and he came to me with the camera. And he said, there's something going on with the camera. It's just not working right. I just thought it was dust or something, so I just said, keep shooting. It'll work itself out. I just didn't really have time to be bothered with it. The first clip is the interference that happened that night, and then what happened after that was, I really can't quite explain.
I'm telling you, it looks like a screaming head. I'm going to zoom in on it. Look at that, it's a screaming head. Dude, in this monitor you can see it really close.
Central State
Hospital is overcrowded.
We have 2,242 patients on our books.
Overcrowded.
Normal capacity.
How many doctors do you have taking care of the patients?
We have nine. Normal capacity.
How many children do you have at Central State?
Oh my, that's one of our big problems. We've got 58 of them. The handling of children is a different problem from the handling of adults. Spread the children out among our adult population where the behavior will get along with the behavior of the people in the various areas.
Personnel need more time to give special patient care.
This 114-year-old
hospital has too many patients,
too small a staff, and is in need of modern facilities.
Well, if you look up here, this was a face, and now it's...
Yeah, whenever me and my dad looked up there, he was sitting in his seat and he says, "Son, do you see that? It looked like a screaming face." And now, about 20 minutes later, I look up there and you can see the wrinkles on the curtain. You can see the wrinkles.
This room, there's one in the center, maybe a hallway, and then there's a window on the other side. And I looked up there, I was talking to Terry, and I looked up and I saw somebody move back. And I thought it was one of us, moving around, but I guess it wasn't.
Were you scared when you went upstairs?
It's the haunted place.
I wasn't scared until there was a closet that I didn't go into. I just felt like I shouldn't open that door. I don't think there was one person on the crew that night that wasn't affected by what had happened to us. We continued shooting for the rest of the evening, but still, there was an edge to the air. And I was compelled to find out why and what had gone on here at this place called Central State.
Central State Mental Institution, menacing and still threatening, stands empty, releasing its last patient in the early 90s. Once known as the Hospital of the Insane, it first opened its doors in 1848 with the hope of treating those less fortunate souls who were suffering from a wide range of mental illness, dementia, schizophrenia, and depression.
There certainly is a draw here, and I never even gave this a second thought until we came out here and shot for river rats. I heard about it, and I'm sure people joked about it, but I never even thought 1 second about it. But once you get here, it's almost like it kind of pulls you in,
For decades, this maze of mortar and bricks was the home of the mentally ill. By the late 1970s, most of the hospital's Victorian buildings were declared unsound and were torn to the ground.
About the Seven Steeples, it used to go from right here where we're at all the way to the other road down there. It was like 3 stories below the ground, 4 stories above, and then you had the attic.
But several structures still stand, including an administration building, power plant, a teaching hospital, a morgue, and the so-called dead house.
Cut sections of brains and body parts and different things in there.
The grounds at Central State hold many secrets, some of which will be revealed here. Others are lost forever.
Dirt tunnels. You used to walk down through those tunnels there, and then they used to open up into big giant rooms.
But possibly the most controversial claims have been the tales of forgotten tunnels and dungeons that ran underground throughout the buildings. But as our footage will show, there are tunnels, 5 miles of tunnels, that run under the belly of the complex.
The patients kind of ran around in here and kind of played hide and seek.
In the 1950s, it was reputed that workers discovered dark rooms with chains and manacles attached to the walls.
But in those tunnels, they were shackled on the walls. You basically went in a room that was 3 foot or maybe a little bit wider door.
The 1870 superintendent of Central State Hospital, Dr. Orpheus Evarts, wrote a testimony that substantiated the horrific existence of these tunnels.
Basement dungeons are dark, humid and foul, unfit for life of any kind, filled with maniacs who raved and howled like tortured beasts, for want of light and air and food and ordinary human associations.
Records show that attendants frequently hit patients, locked them in closets, and restrained them for long periods of time. Even medical practitioners believed that patients could be cured through confinement or punishment. It has since been discovered that some of the patients who died at Central State were buried in unmarked graves close to the property.
And folks rarely, if ever, left the grounds. And they would die there, and they would have a cemetery. Some of the graves are very hard to discern the names. It's kind of vexing. You can't always tell who's buried where.
What's this?
This is the graveyard for Central State. We found it.
Mysterious sightings have been made of figures disappearing into walls, sounds of footsteps, distant moaning and crying. Ex-workers report feeling and even seeing their presence.
And I'd hear doors shut, swing open, and all that.
Central State was finally closed in 1994 amid allegations of abuse and crimes against the patients. We wanted to probe into the mysteries that are hidden inside the grounds of the hospital.
So my research began with the more traditional methods, documents and interviews. But what was quickly evident was the more non-traditional events that began to surface about Central State.
You're going to be scared.
I was compelled by the mystery of the place, and I needed to find out more.
Well, I talk to him every day. And he's gone. Can you take us to him? Yeah. Took him back up one of the crawl spaces, and there he was. She went down there and talked to him dead every day.
Obviously, it was founded over 150 years ago and was part of the asylum movement. And as part of a general trend to deinstitutionalize, a lot of hospitals were downsized starting in the 1950s. We looked at the diagnoses of folks who were initially admitted, and that diagnostic list was, well, let's put it this way, it doesn't fit with our current thinking about diagnosis. Back in the, I think it was like the 1840s, there were very few diagnoses. As a matter of fact, the most predominant diagnosis was idiot. I mean, that was the diagnosis, idiocy. And obviously the treatments that psychiatry and psychology have utilized for those with mental illness have ranged from compassionate to the medieval.
Went through a lot being in there. I survived.
They picked Central State specifically because there was a lot of problems with patient care. People were dying in their care, and they felt unsafe there.
But there's still spirits out here, I wouldn't doubt that.
their spirits are still here. So I would suspect that there's a lot of spirits here in the hopes that someone, somehow, will free them from the horrors that they have lived through all of their lives.
I don't know what the disorders were. There was one woman there that she would do things to torture cells. They'd have to remove pins and needles from her legs, or she would force them up underneath their skin.
It was a puzzle, and we didn't know what to do. And so in the efforts to try to help folks, you would do things that, in retrospect, look cruel.
And I think that this is one of the reasons, too, why people want to try to connect with spirits, to find out how we can help them.
What they're doing is they're electrically throwing your brain into convulsions.
Matter of fact, Nobel Prizes were won for things like lobotomy, because we just had no clue what to do with these individuals. And so those sorts of things happened at Central State too. And folks were put in cold baths, and folks were put in isolation and straitjackets, and all this kind of things now that you wouldn't see. We're done there.
Since I was a very small child, I have been a person that's been fascinated with architecture, with archaeology, with things from the past. To me, the past is something that's in the present. In my world, past, present, future happen all at one time. I call it present time. I'd heard stories from people that had worked there that had been very spooked by different occurrences there. So that intrigued me to go there and check it out.
We're here to meet the IPI team to do the investigation at Central State.
You know, it opened in 1850, and it was for the mentally insane and criminally insane. Their population peaked around 1950s, and it was just a huge operation. It's 160 acres, all the support buildings and everything else.
There was something that was very negative that was going on here. And the spot they picked to build this administration building is interesting to me too, because it feels like it's on what I would call power spot. There's definitely energy here.
This was where the people were kept at.
And again, energy can be used in a negative or positive way.
Psychiatrists are well trained. Psychologists are well trained. Social workers are well trained. But the people who are caring for folks even today, you know, in a typical hospital, have training, but they're not psychiatrists.
He did things to kind of mess with the patients.
By and large, they are behaviorists, and their training is somewhat limited. It doesn't pay well, there's turnover, and so the folks that do that do it because they have a good heart, but sometimes they don't have a good heart. I mean, you do get the bad apple, and sometimes bad things happen. So I think that there's clearly many cases of seclusion and restraint that were inappropriate. And the kinds of restraints varied from, you know, the more sensitive types to those that are, you know, are medieval.
It was in a warm building, but it's like a real cold presence, like a spirit or something around you.
Well, things come to fruition with the full moon. That lunar activity activates things in what we would call the astral or subconscious mind. So it wasn't just in your minds, it was actually bringing out things that were inherently hidden in that place. The more people you have, the energies that are there respond to those electromagnetic fields. And so they're putting on a show. We're not separate from anything. We think everything is separate, but we're all one big energy. So when you have people, especially on a full moon on a Friday the 13th, you're gonna have activity.
Clearly, there's a lot of psychological, you know, there's like a schema that you have whenever you go to a mental asylum, and people have that, they're scared.
3 weeks to a month before I could adjust, I was just terrified.
To go into a mental hospital, to be a worker there, or to be, you know, inpatient there, I think is psychologically quite distressing for many people. Whether or not there's anything paranormal on top of it or not. Are there ghosts? Are there things that go bump in the night? Again, you have anecdotal stories which seem to be kind of interesting, but we don't have a science for doing that. I don't think there's any question that these things occur. The question is, what's the genesis of that? Is it really something extra normal? Is it something more explicable? But as a personal statement, I tend to think there is something there that's mysterious. and that we don't understand.
This place definitely has some energy. You just kind of feel it being here.
Say the prayer of their choice, okay? Whatever touches their greatest good, and ask that the spirits be with us tonight. Help us, guide us, put white light around us. Help us with the spirits that are here. See, that's supposed to keep negative energy from hitting you. Help us to help them.
One time you used to be able to see the fountains that were in the front of the building, and then there's one still there in front of Evans Building that's covered with bushes. There was a patient that had died out in the fountains.
A few patients managed to slip away from their caretakers, sometimes harming another or themselves. Under the grove of trees, a violent attack took place. A maniacal patient killing another in the most violent way.
There's actually 2 that I knew, patients that had died out there. When I would go to do check grounds at night when I was a supervisor, I would see like shadows move.
It is said that you can still hear the cries and groans of this poor soul echoing through the night.
That just kind of scared me. Patients used to congregate a lot in the grove, and you would always see them talking, but I always thought that was they were listening to their voices and talking to them.
He was always seeing somebody wait outside of the room at night. He could look out and see them.
Entities dressed in flowing gowns still find the grove as a place of refuge.
They always, when I was younger, they always said the older patients could see the ghosts more than the newer ones, because the older ones weren't as medicated or weren't on the newer medicines and that. So they always said that there was like a psychic link between the older patients and what was going on out there.
Anybody that came in there felt it like a spirit was like trying to smother you, trying to crush you.
Alive with energy, yeah. The administration building.
It's on one of what I would call power spots. There's definitely energy here that, and again, energy can be used in a negative or positive way. And I feel like there's still a lot of activity going in and out of this building. There's a lot of energy still hanging here.
Administration building, and I've sat in there and watched the midnight shift, being here by myself after it closed. And I'd hear doors shut. Have you been in there, you seen that big glass? I'd sat in there, relaxing, and I heard a woman in heels. Clunk, 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 walk right up that glass. I jumped up and I looked, wasn't no one there. While I was standing there looking, I heard her walk away. Before I started working, I never believed in ghosts.
Cleanse this place and release these tortured beings and let them go on to higher levels of consciousness.
The old administration building, the upper floors.
You can't really feel it. You're under all this truth serum or whatever they have.
You always felt like this used to be really busy.
Wow. I'm seeing...
Some patients are just demon possessed from the way they acted and the things they did.
There's a vortex right here. There's an energy that swirls this way. It's like a tornado. It can't move. It's like trapped. There's a very oppressive, there's an olfactory thing that happens with spirits too. And when people have crossed over and gone to the other side, a lot of people will have smells that were associated with their loved ones. They'll smell the perfume the person wore, or the cigar they smoked, or it can go in reverse. There are foul energies. They can put off a sulfuric smell. And death has an odor. The minute we came down this hall, there's a very strong, dank odor, and it's like a sulfuric, like when you light matches, kind of odor that I'm picking up. So we have to cleanse this building. And I'm just going to do a little short prayer before we go up to where the energy is up there. We ask the bodies to align mentally, spiritually, physically, emotionally in the present time. We ask for protection of all of us that are here dealing with these energies at this time. We ask all the beings of light to aid in the healing and releasing of the souls that are trapped here. We ask all negative energies, experiences, memories that are still recorded here in a vibratory level. We ask them to be cleansed and released. We ask the Archangel Michael to sever all negative umbilicals that are binding anything to this place in a negative way.
And he didn't want to be bothered by anybody. If you came around, he would cuss you. And he was an artist. He would draw these real satanic type. One was like of a bull, but the face on it looked real demonic. The eyes did.
This is interesting because of the location. This actually is the one room that has some light and energy.
Were you scared when you went upstairs?
I wasn't scared until there was a closet that I didn't go into. I just felt like I shouldn't open it.
Keep getting the name Mary.
Admitted June the 1st, 1877, age 20. Periodic mania and spinal deformity. Died 5:30 a.m., August the 3rd, 1898. Buried here.
We're in this group in a hospital with 2,600 patients. A grim side of the mental illness, like we're criminals hiding from a past.
That's weird.
The ones that would probably never get to see on the outside.
How would they get up here? This is a real powerful spot. This is kind of like the negative power spot in this building. This definitely is very commanding energy here. Like I was talking about how buildings manifest negative and positive things, and so the amount of destruction that's in this room, there's a lot trying, it's almost like whatever this room is about, it's trying to move something.
And then we're going to go over to the cafeteria, and we're going to set up over there and hook up some fixed cameras and go from there.
The cafeteria, once a place for gathering and sharing, stands empty, but still echoing with long-forgotten sounds of former patients.
We want all hell to break loose. We want proof that we can make a connection. I know the spirits are here, and I know I can connect with them.
What was it that was drawing me to Central State? A lot of this kind of stuff. What voices needed to be heard here?
Some of them think we're the ghost, so they will hide from us.
Equipped with EMF metering equipment, the IPI team searched the cafeteria for signs of the paranormal. In theory, ghosts and/or spirits give off electrical energy that can be monitored by this device.
There's something right here.
It's kind of like a car alarm.
Did you get anything in there?
EVP, electronic voice phenomenon. It's alleged that spirits will communicate through electronic recording devices.
The theory about spirit and entity is the reason the area gets cold or hot is because it sucks the energy out of that area, and that's why you get cold spots or hot spots.
The powerhouse, one of the oldest structures still standing, has been focus of many reports of the supernatural.
And when we die, this electrical energy comes out of our bodies, and it's just there in the atmosphere, charging the atmosphere, and that is what the spirits are.
We're made up of electromagnetic energy, and because of that, places that are conductors of electromagnetic energy, old power plants, are a source of spirit activity because of the way the energy fields are already set up there.
Deep in the basement of the powerhouse, apparitions took on a different shape, with clanging of pipes, and in one instance, an assault on a sleeping workman.
Unexplained things I've seen around here.
Deep in the darkness of the basement, a spirit is reported to have choked this unsuspecting soul as he slept. The workman awoke, gasping for air as he opened his eyes to darkness. Breaking free from what he thought was a human attack, he ran to the light switch and turned in a panic to see his attacker. But there was no one there, nothing but his empty cot. He was later examined and found to have deep red marks around his neck with no physical explanation.
He went in there and set a net and caught up in there and took a little nap.
That's where you got strangled?
And he come over, put that light on, looked back in, and as you can see, there's no way out in there. It's just one little room, and he couldn't find nobody in there. He would not go back in there. He was willing to be fired before he went in there.
This has to do with whatever's underneath here. There's like a lot of really stagnant, what I would call astral energy that's trapped down under here, and it's stagnant and it's malefic.
And he couldn't find nobody in there. Nobody in there.
This camera is an IR camera, so that it'll be able to get infrared images, and things are getting a little scary.
The IPI team began their search using the IR camera technology well suited for low light conditions.
Oh, hold up, guys. Hold up 1 second. We've got a lot of energy in this area. I had to lean against the wall for a second. There was a confrontation and someone was choked. Oh, a spirit did this. D-I-E.
And when was that?
I don't know. I just thought I saw movement to the left between those pillars. Okay, myself personally, I'm going to take a few steps back. I'm just way too sensitive to the energy down here. I can sense that you're here. I feel that it wants us to exit.
Yeah, we're waiting for you.
Upon exiting the powerhouse, the IPI team found a discarded artifact.
Flashlight?
Left behind as if its previous owner ran from this place.
I think that we've disturbed this energy in here enough.
That's what got me. Person being strangled or...
The one energy in the basement that wanted us to leave, that's why I said I'm going to stay back.
When the team had exited the powerhouse, we picked up these final sounds.
We're headed over now. We're taking the team over to the Evans building. We're going to set up in there, set up the IR cameras, and then we're going to get access to the other tunnel.
The more recent structures, Evans, Bolton, Barr, still seem active, even though the last inhabitant left over a decade ago.
Was in a place where patients had been in some of the worst institutes, and There was one of these back wards where they kept the real elderly. This one woman, she had this real, it was kind of a witchy, it was kind of a haunted scream and stuff. We'd walk down the hallways, but I always heard that.
What about hum coming down?
The therapist was always in my face telling me everything that was wrong with me. That, you know, I didn't like his attitude, so one day out of revolt, I jumped up, got him in a headlock, and knocked him to the ground. So they pushed the panic button. Next thing, they had a mob squad down on me, and I was in a quiet room. And I was being injected with all kinds of mind-altering drugs.
The quiet room was anything but that. In isolation, patients often suffered a worse agony, as they were left alone with their thoughts and the voices.
He got out of control. I don't know what it was, and he started slashing his arms all up. They'd locked him in that, but he was in there for about a week.
After experiencing the quiet room, for me things began to seem odd, maybe a bend of reality. I no longer felt exactly safe, but in the middle of something that I didn't really understand. This place, its energy, began to work on all of us, stripping away the curiosity that brought us here, and replacing it with fear and distortion. There was a constant feeling as if someone or something was watching, waiting.
It's an audio tape recorder. Old audio tape recorder, all steel. Weighs about 20 pounds. They used to dictate about patients on these.
Miriam talks freely of the care and treatment she received.
I think today still we're very primitive in our methods. Electroshock treatment given without any pre-treatment. I think
electroshock treatment, electroshock treatment, electroshock treatment, electroshock treatment given without.
The team had submersed themselves deep into this sea of despair and agony that still resonated within the walls of Central State.
Shapes illuminated by our light seemed almost foreign as to their function or purpose. I found myself having trouble breathing. I had a strong sense that we must leave. Oh, God. What is that?
This room seemed even more sinister. What form of human had been here and used this device?
Something just came in around me. This is where they have the heavy-duty people in the room.
What must have patients thought when they were brought in here and laid down, exposed and vulnerable to the whims of others?
Sometimes, yeah, it was hard to sleep.
The tunnels at Central State hold tales of distant cries, moaning, and even death.
About a year before, and had just built Evans Building and Bolton Building. And the tunnels were still there.
Do you think what goes down to the tunnels?
I don't know. Let me see.
When you're out on the ground, you kind of like to explore around. You kind of don't like to be kept to one space. There's either one or two other patients who were with me. So as I walked down that tunnel, I was telling me, he was telling me this is where they used to shackle people.
Shackle people.
As the team descended down to the tunnels, the air seemed choking and heavy. In the early days of Central State, It was thought that confinement and exclusion were the best forms of treatment for the mentally ill. So patients were kept in isolation and even shackled to walls. Dark and foreboding, the lower levels of the complex still echo of the tragic fate of those who were kept here.
It's hot down here, isn't it?
When we came through that door, I could feel it behind me coming up.
Yeah, there's like, we have a couple.
It actually, the tunnel used to go to the old, what they used to call 8 towers. It had 8 towers. That was one of the old ancient names for Central State. 7 steeples, because you could only see 7 steeples from either way, but there were actually 8 towers. The tunnels where you could go from the administration building into the old main building were, or you could go from the administration building to any of the buildings on grounds, even the powerhouse and the old pathology building.
I'm not getting anything.
I don't remember that hum coming down.
The tunnels are large enough to put a gurney through, and all you have to do is lower your head to get through them. They're very massive tunnels. All the hot water, the electric, and everything are spread out between them. The old 8 towers, that used to have places where patients were put into isolation, and that in the basement. Then there was the rattling of the chains where they used to keep the patients in isolation. You could hear them when you were in Evans Building's tunnel going to the administration building.
Yeah.
I'm sure that the experience that the gentleman had that went to sleep with waking up and someone strangling him came from here. It was someone that had been a violent person that had been blocked up in here and had escaped.
I do know that some of the old tunnels are still there underneath where the old women's building was, or the old main building. And you used to have to go down into the basement.
Yeah, it's creepy down here.
Thought I saw like a skirt, a white skirt with a red cape going through one time when I was taking a patient over from Bolton to Evans.
Did they keep people down here? When I came into the room, yeah, there's definitely strange, totally different energy in here.
The appearance of the orbs at that particular point is because we had freed the spirits that were trapped there, or many of them. And the color and the dancing energy of the orbs is beautiful. It's how spirit looks when you see it in non-physical form.
But I'm wondering if the tunnel, or if there's something under here.
We used to take patients from Bolton Building to the hospital unit, which was in Barr, in the tunnels, if it was inclement weather.
Because I do think that there were times that the patients kind of ran around and kind of played hide and seek and did. But the more we got toward the block door down there, I felt a really heavy energy of confinement, and it's like a dungeon. It's kind of like the dungeon energy.
Red lady, that I heard about her. She was a nurse that used to do ground checks. She died in an accident down in the old main building.
Yeah.
It was like about 20 years before they tore it down, and she used to wear a red cape when she went through the ground. And if you saw her when you were going through the tunnel, she would come up and touch you to tell you were in the wrong place.
Electromagnetic field meter. And at one point we got a reading that just seemed to manifest itself in a particular area.
I got some. I'm picking something up on my EMF. You just saw a shadow over here too by me. I got an EMF reading pretty strong. Oh, just quit.
Which is very unusual and unexplainable.
just seeing the flash of red and the white when I was in the tunnels between Bolton and Barr. I kept asking, what's this? And then one of the older attendants that had been there for about 50 years told me about the Lady in Red and said that you really needed to watch it towards the old Seven Steeples because she would definitely stop you. I would feel like a cold chill when I would go in the tunnels. Something's here. Something's here is what I felt.
Tracy, what about your readings?
Yeah, let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah, this is the next one.
It's a very strong signal.
Oh, yeah. Huh, what's this? There's something.
Something went out ahead of us. I don't like it in there.
As we entered the room, it felt as if we were trespassing into another era, one that we didn't belong to. And the things we found were strange and threatening.
Never go anywhere in a situation like this where you can't stand up and run.
The team decided to visit the administration building one last time before concluding the night's investigation.
It's a big place, a lot of buildings, and to catch something on video, probably you're just going to have to be in the right place at the right time.
I don't know why, but I felt as if we were being drawn to the building, the very place that had started this journey for me.
Most of the investigation proved interesting, but turned up no clear results until review of the footage captured that night. What was revealed defies explanation.
If that was someone walking in front of that, you would see a disruption in the reflection of the illuminator.
There's no, it doesn't look like a human shape.
It was a collective group of negative energies, unharnessed energy, spirits, as some people call them.
Well, the IR is on the front of the camera, it's pointing straight.
As you'll see here in this footage, the autofocus on the front of the camera was triggered. And that only happens when something passes in front of the camera.
If it was going to break the IR beam, it would have to be in front of the camera.
Well, the way my camera's made, that you would have saw it on film also, I would think.
It's out of the ordinary.
It's definitely out of the
ordinary. It's unexplainable.
Unexplainable.
The places you visit in life are like chapters for your soul.
You see that? Look like a screaming face.
And the experiences that you encounter, the words, the thoughts, the feelings, are the pages. I keep looking for signs of life to remind me that I'm human, and to never forget what humans can do to each other, good and bad. This was no accident that we came here to tell the story, as if to give voice once again to the wandering lost souls of this place.
A grim side of the mental illness. I think we should talk about rehabilitation, about getting well, not feeling as if we're criminals hiding from a past.
I didn't feel as if it was treatment for a patient.
I felt as if this was 6 centuries ago, perhaps how they deal with mental illness.
I think today still we're very primitive in our methods.
Everybody out?
For housing the mentally ill, crazy people.